Back a year ago.
This episode of the Beer Bound Podcast is brought to you by Rolling Hops Beer Tours.
Hey everybody, Garrett here from Rolling Hops, as always joined with my partner,
Andy.
We're here to tell you guys about our virtual craft beer tour offering. With what's going on in the world, unfortunately, we haven't been able to run our historical craft walking beer tour, so we've pivoted to taking the virtual experience of craft beer directly to you guys. Wonderful for team building events, corporate events, even just a night out or in, for that matter, with your friends and family. And we're doing this online.
Have any questions about the beer tours or want us to tailor make an event for you? Just shoot us an email or send us a message on any form of social media. Rolling Hops, you can find us everywhere.
RollingHopsBeerTours.com is where you can get a hold of us, and we'll see you guys soon.
Cheers. All right, welcome everyone to another episode of the Beer Bound Podcast. We're super excited to be joined by Casey and Ben from Westside Ale Works. This eclectic brewery is family owned and operated and can be found thousands of miles away from where Garrett and I are in Melbourne, Australia. So partner and head brewer Casey Wagner pays homage to the microbreweries of the West Coast United States with everything he does, from the cozy atmosphere of their warehouse-style taproom to the hop-driven beers he brews. The brewery takes pride in creating a warm and welcoming experience for anyone who walks through its big roller doors. We're super excited to learn more about craft beer in Melbourne and in Australia in general. So, gentlemen, welcome to the Beer Bound Podcast. How are you guys doing?
Very good. Thanks for having us.
Welcome.
Welcome indeed. Well, guys, maybe you can start us off. We gave a little bit of introduction to you guys, but Casey, you can start us off with a little bit more information about you, your role within the brewery, and just your connection to beer in general.
Yeah, so I guess quickly, I grew up in Seattle, Washington, so pretty close to Canada. I went to Vancouver a few times when I was 18. And moved down to Southern California. Kind of got into craft beer in Seattle, and then really got into it when I was down in the San Diego area, kind of the early 2000s. Visited quite a few breweries there, and really started getting passionate about craft beer. And then ended up moving to Australia, where when I moved here, it was about 2013. And craft beer really wasn't, around too much yet. So I kind of decided to leave my corporate job and start a small craft brewery here and kind of focus on the beers that I liked back on the West Coast to here in Australia.
Awesome. And Ben, maybe just a bit about yourself.
So my name is Ben. I'm the assistant brewer with Casey here at Westside Ale Works. We've been working closely for the last 2 years to hopefully create some great beers and some solid recipes. I myself, from a small country called Estonia, so up in North and Eastern Europe, and my beer traits have been going on for about 10 years now. So it's kind of good to have a bit of an expansion and learn a little bit more knowledge from this guy over here about some West Coast IPAs and whatnot.
Casey, since you're from the United States, you have a bit of a grasp on the craft beer culture that exists, obviously, in its thriving nation of the US. I mean, it's sort of the epicenter of craft beer. Can you compare it a little bit to maybe the West Coast of the US, the craft beer scene in relation to a big thriving city like Melbourne? Is it a little bit similar? Are your beer styles going to be quite relatable and synonymous between the two locations, or is it a lot different? Is the craft beer scene a lot different in Australia?
I think about this a lot, because especially when I travel back and forth from the States to here, I always kind of compare and see what's out there compared to here. And I was just back there about 2 months ago, so I kind of still am aware of what's going on in the US and the trends there. and then the vice versa, what's going on here. I think it's pretty close now. Over the last couple of years, Australia's caught up quite a bit with the mainstream craft beer that's out there. So you can get most of the styles that you get there here. I think the thing that's still kind of lacking is the overall education of the consumer in Australia. I think it's just quite a bit further advanced with craft beer in the US than it is here. So that'll take time before it's more and more mainstream here, but you can definitely get just about any style and pretty high quality craft beer now these days here in Australia.
And what about, I know you're in one of the two big cities in Australia. Do you see it as kind of an urban trend that craft beer kind of have to go to the main cities, or is it more like the United States that craft beer is just kind of everywhere?
It definitely started kind of in the urban settings here in Australia. So I think Melbourne kind of led the way with craft breweries popping up. And then, Sydney kind of caught on pretty quick. And then, Brisbane's catching up. But the rural areas are starting to really pop up with a lot of breweries as well. So people are supporting it in the small towns almost more than sometimes the big cities, because I think they have so much limited option out there that the locals are really kind of embracing it. And the little regional towns are popping up new craft breweries every day. So it's definitely spreading out wide and fast here in Australia.
Well, I know I have some Australian friends and who live in Canada, and they often say, I mean, this is their interpretation, but they like to think that like Australian culture is it's very interested in American culture. It's kind of like Canada, like whether we believe it or not, or whether we like it or not, like our media is just saturated with American content, and we probably more Canadians maybe follow American politics than our own politics, stuff like that. Do you kind of find that? Do you see like craft beer in Australia is just sort of a ripple effect of the US, or do you think it's does it have its own identity that is unique to itself?
Yeah, I definitely say it's a mixture. Like, you'll see the new trend beers like the cold IPAs or the brewed IPAs or whatever popping up from the States. And then, usually about 6 months to a year later, it'll pop up here in Australia. But I think the thing that's probably different is because it's a hotter climate in general, there tends to be more popularity towards like the lighter beer styles. So like a XPA is really popular here, and the really light pale ales, and definitely the lagers. So it's a little bit different in that regard, where you don't see as much people going after darker or heavier alcohol beers. They're more gravitate towards the lighter stuff and the lighter alcohol, which I think is kind of unique to Australia.
What's an XPA? I can only assume what it might be, but
it's like an Aussie thing. Basically, it's just a pale ale, but it's like the palest of pale.
Yeah,
extra pale. So it's just no crystal malt whatsoever. Just kind of base malt, very light base malt, like a light lager base malt. And then the hops are usually fruity Australian fruit forward hops. So you get that kind of that smooth fruitiness from the hops, and not a lot of malt character, but it goes down well on a hot day.
Actually, maybe I can talk a little bit about the hops, because I know there are a number of places in the world that are known for growing hops, but I've heard that Australia does produce a good amount of their own. So, maybe you can tell us about a couple of unique varieties. Have maybe some of those varieties driven some beer styles that, whether you brew them or maybe that you've seen just overall in the industry in Australia?
Yeah, so we're lucky here that we're pretty close to the hop fields themselves. So there's, in our state of Victoria, they grow quite a bit of hops, and then just south of us in Tasmania, there's quite a bit more grown there. So we can actually get fresh hops here, usually kind of right after the season's been harvested in March. And I don't have a ton of experience with Australian hops or even Kiwi hops, but I'm starting to get into them more and more. But because the US scene's like gone crazy, especially with the hazies, it's actually really hard to get your hands on Australian hops. So I've kind of stopped using some of them just because it's just too hard. At one point there was like a 3-year waiting list on Galaxy,
Wow.
even though it's grown like, just down the road from us. So
Yeah, that's
I
pretty
like
nuts.
Australian hops, but they are in high demand these days, especially because they are pretty fruit forward and go well in those hazy styles of beer.
Mm.
Yeah, Big Secret is probably my favorite one in Australia, and you get kind of a nice balance of like the dankness and the fruitiness, usually some pineapple in there. But it's a pretty well-rounded hop, I think. So that's probably my favorite Australian one. And then New Zealand, we just actually locally won the New Zealand Hop Challenge, which was all like kind of the best breweries in Australia produced an IPA, and they got one specific type of hop that they had to brew with. And we got Muter, which I had never used in my life, but we were able to win it. So I'm definitely going to start branching out more and more into some New Zealand hops too, and see what else is out there. So I started getting a few contracts with them, and hopefully we'll start brewing them more and more. But because we're an American style brewery, we kind of focus on that, that unique flavor that you wouldn't necessarily get over here. So we do a lot of American hops.
Fair enough. Got to get those West Coast style IPAs flowing, right?
Yep.
Do most of your hops, Casey, come from like the Pacific Northwest? Is that the region where they would come from?
Yakima, Washington. I used to import directly from there to here to our brewery, and the shipping kind of got out of control, but also Australia kind of caught up in terms of how they were importing them themselves. So we could actually get pretty high quality ones now from local distributors here. So I kind of switched and got contracts here locally. But when I first opened the brewery in 2016, the quality of the U.S. imported hops were pretty low. So it's come a long way, and the quality is much better here now.
In the past couple of years, obviously, we're kind of, hopefully, fingers crossed, sort of coming out of the pandemic. We're all hoping that that is true. Here in Canada, we heard, I think was covered pretty well in our news that Australia was pretty strict with your, I guess, your migration policy. You sort of closed the doors on a lot of folks entering the country. Canada as well. Lots of countries did. And I think something that happened, there was a bit of particularly in Canada, there was sort of a movement to support local, and sort of on the precipice of it, on the front of that was craft beer, just because craft beer is a big symbol of small business in Canada. It's maybe one of the most popular small business categories that we have. Did you see that in Australia? How did you guys cope in the past couple of years? Did you really, I don't know if typically in normal years you do focus on some of the tourist market. Did the community really come together and purchase your products during the past couple of years? How has your last couple of years been?
Yeah, I'll give my take real quick, and then maybe we'll see what Ben's differs from me. But we had about 6 lockdowns here, and I think we were the most locked down city in the world. So it was pretty tough here. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it too much, but the start of it, the first few lockdowns, I think local communities really did embrace us and shut up at our roller door to purchase our beer for takeaway. We even we normally serve pizzas, so we were doing pizzas for takeaway, and we kind of pivoted and started driving our cars around everywhere, like dropping off at people's houses, and we did what we could to kind of keep the ship moving. And I think after like the 4th and 5th and 6th lockdowns, I think people kind of stopped spending as much, and they kind of were just waiting to see what was going to happen with the economy, and are we going to reopen next week, next month, next year? What's that going to look like? So it kind of really tailed off there in the last ones, and it was definitely a struggle for us. So we had to pivot again, and then we started to get into wholesale because we just weren't getting the support locally. I think that people were just burnt out. So we kind of started doing more and more wholesale, and it's not really a brewery our size. It's not really enough to sustain us in the wholesale game. So it was tough. We had to lay off quite a bit of our staff, and we're still kind of trying to play catch up on that. And even though we're back open, it still is a slow recovery here. Luckily, the border's starting to reopen. We're starting to see some people come back, and at the start of the year, we actually had a few tourists come back into the brewery, which was kind of a strange sighting because we hadn't seen them in so long. But the whole idea and location of our brewery is that we're so small that we can actually be close to the city center, unlike most breweries that are larger and kind of further out. So we actually rely a lot on tourism and people staying in the city central and then coming into our brewery to check us out, because we're probably the closest within walking distance from the middle of the city, very, very close to the convention center. So yeah, to lose all that trade for that long was pretty tough. But hopefully it starts coming back sooner than later. But yeah, we're still in recovery mode. But Ben might have another take on it. I don't know. What do you think?
I think it's more or less like you're still feeling the effects even like years later. Especially with the Melbourne city centre, there's still not many people out there. People are still scared to venture out. But as Casey was saying before, people couldn't go out. People weren't allowed to leave their homes. So their saving grace was their bottle shop, or it was their local supermarket. So getting wholesale out there kind of encouraged other communities, more or less than just the one that we currently are established in, to experience more craft beer and to get out there and support more local from more of a distance. And as Casey was saying, we are still feeling the effects, but yeah, hopefully it will increase, and we are at small capacity, so it would be good to have a little bit more tourism. We got to remain optimistic. Sometimes things seem bleak, but we're doing well.
That's good to hear. Yeah, hopefully things do get back to normal. And I guess being, like you said, close to the city center, I guess tourism was probably a big part of what you leaned on. Like, do you have any plans when things start getting back to normal to ramp that up a little bit, maybe get that foot traffic going a little bit more? Is there anything sort of in the works, or just, for the most part, opening up and being welcoming?
Well, we've got a couple of big festivals coming up that are really going to kind of launch our colder weather beer drinking, which to me, kind of as the weather gets colder here in Australia, you get kind of more of the craft beer diehards that come out. So I'm kind of looking forward to that. But we have two big festivals coming up very close by to the brewery. And then we're also, for the first time, taking part in a program called Pint of Origin. And it's 16 of the kind of the best craft beer venues in Melbourne. And they host like a different region of beer for a week. So some of the venues are doing like, we're doing Europe, some are doing the US, some are doing Canada, Japan, Asia, and then all the different regions of Australia. So like, one will do South Australia, Queensland, Victoria, regional towns, New Zealand, things like that. So it's a pretty big deal, and usually we get a lot of interstate travel that week, people coming to check everything out. So we're the only brewery taking part in it. Everyone else is like a bar or pub. So it kind of, to me, it kind of shows off that we're versatile and we're not just a brewery. We also have guest taps and a bottle shop fridge, and we like to embrace good beer from anywhere, whether it's down the street or in Europe. So I'm looking forward to that. Hopefully people show up for it. I think we've definitely got the fridges stocked with kegs and bottles and cans. And then those festivals should kind of top it off. So hopefully we have a nice end to this month, and then into June we have another festival. So it should be a pretty busy time for us next couple of months.
Awesome. And I guess you said you're showcasing as European. Have you got any nice European styles locked and loaded?
Yeah, so we tried to get from just about anywhere we could. We didn't have a ton of time to actually collab with a lot of breweries, but we've got a few of the recipes from the Pravda brewery in Ukraine, which I think we've got about 3 or 4 of those that we'll have on tap. We've got some kegs, some imperial stouts from Estonia, my friends here, home country. We've got all kinds of different breweries in Belgium and Germany and Italy, Czech. We've got them just about everywhere, so it'll be a pretty mean tap list, and that should be advertise. There's like it's called pineoforigin.com, but our tap list and everyone else's tap list will be advertised on there. So if any of you guys are interested in seeing what's actually on tap from different regions, pop onto that website and it'll have everything there and all the tap lists.
Pint of Origin. Yeah, I'll have to check it out.
Casey and Ben, can you enlighten us a little bit on maybe how distribution works, as well as how alcohol in general is regulated, maybe in the state of Victoria or in Australia in general? Like where we live in Toronto, the government has strong controls over our sales and distribution of alcohol, whether it be beer, wine, whatever. Basically, it's changing a little bit, but basically there's only two vendors that you can purchase any alcohol from in the entire province. So I don't know, how does that work for Victoria or Australia?
Alcohol excise in general has evolved a lot since I started. When we first opened, they would take about 40% of your total excise bill, and then refund you 60% up to, I think it was like $70,000 a year or something like that. So for a small brewery like me, I didn't really go over the threshold. So I was able to get about 60% back of our excise tax. And then that kind of evolved, and I think it grew to 150,000, and now it's actually 100% back, which just happened last July, and that's up to I think $300,000 worth of excise. So for someone like us who's small, it actually is a big boost because we get to keep a lot of our revenue that was otherwise going to the government. So it does benefit the small guys. If you're a medium to large size craft brewery, you probably go through that in a month or two. So some of them are not benefiting as much, but I guess it kind of helps the small guy to get going, which is much needed. I think something that's still very, very lacking, which I don't know how it is in Canada. I don't think it's the same, but they have tap contracts here in Australia, and that kind of locks you out from a lot of bars and pubs. So if a pub's opening up and they can't afford their own tap system and glycol chillers and things like that, the big brands will come in and say, okay, we'll go ahead and fit out your setup, but you can exclusively only have us on tap and in your fridges for the next 3 years or 5 years or whatever it is. And
Wow.
then you're locked out from those venues. You can't approach them. You can't sell to them. And they've had a lot of kind of research into this here in Australia, and every time they keep saying that it's perfectly fine, there's nothing wrong with tap contracts, and we should continue it on. And there's a lot of independent breweries who disagree with that, but I think that's probably the next big change that I hope to see Australia make in the next few years. And then other than that,
It's regulation really, and where alcohol is sold.
yeah, and excise tax in general here is quite high, like compared to the States. And then, but wholesale wise, you can kind of sell to whoever you want. There's a lot of distributors. It's just whether or not they have a contract in place with that venue, you can't approach them.
Yeah, you just can't walk into a convenience store and pick up some alcohol, or go into your local supermarket and pick up some alcohol. I'm not sure if the regulations are similar in Canada than it is to Australia, where it's this alcohol is sold at a very specific place, for example, like a bottle shop or a bar, unlike in Europe or the States where you can like walk into any mall or mart and
Or supermarket.
Yeah, and just pick them off the shelf. So I guess that kind of restricts your clientele to where you can sell. But on the better end of the spectrum, this allows you, being such a small business, to create and harness better relationships with small businesses such as yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah,
restriction-wise, it's pretty simple, easy going, as long as you have the cash for the excise and you can sell wherever you want, other than supermarkets.
Yeah, we just got, what was it, like 2 or 3 years ago? We just got beer and wine in our supermarkets, and mind you, it's not all of them still. So that was a big step up for Canada. There's a lot of people really pushing for that, and I think the next big push is to try and have them in convenience stores or your corner shop or things like that. Which there's points for it, and there's points against it, and some, we've talked to a number of local craft breweries, and some are for it and some are against it for a number of different reasons. But yeah, hey, I guess more accessibility is a good thing in certain ways. I would like to see it, especially for craft beer, as a craft beer drinker, obviously. But there's probably a bigger picture to look at, of course.
Yeah, I tried to ship some beer to some of my mates in Montreal not too long ago. It was crazy expensive to get through all the hoops and everything there. So I probably won't do it again, but hopefully that'll lighten up someday because yeah, it's definitely not easy to get beer into Canada.
Actually, in Quebec, it usually is a little more relaxed. Because I think they can, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, Andy, I haven't been to Quebec in a while, but I think they can have at certain corner shops some beer. Or maybe it's just the SAQ, but
I had to have like a local importer there that I had to pay off just to get it in.
oh, wow.
And so it ended up costing, I think, a couple $100 for a 6-pack of beer. So yeah, it wasn't
Hefty.
really worth it, I don't think. But they're good friends, so I'm happy to do it. But I probably won't do it very often.
Yeah, fair enough. Might as just bring it across, bring it to Seattle next time you go, and
Mm.
might be a little
Yeah.
cheaper.
Yeah.
But the beer was great when I was up there. I was in Montreal not too long ago, and some good breweries there.
Oh yeah, plenty of good ones. They do some really good Belgian styles. There was what was it, there was a brewing awards recently, and a lot of Quebec breweries were praised for their Belgian style ales.
Well, besides shipping the 6-pack to to Montreal, like how far is the distribution for your beers? Like where can across Australia, where can I find Westside Ale Works beer, or outside of the country?
Yeah.
How far do
Yeah,
you guys reach?
Our business model was pretty much designed to just be selling over the bar. And I think we've kind of evolved, especially with COVID. So currently we're distributed nationwide by a company called Redwood Distribution, and they're actually from California, but they're a local company here in Melbourne. And they distribute other Australian breweries around Australia, as well as import quite a bit of beer from Europe and mainly California area, but kind of all over as well. So yeah, we use them for probably about maybe a quarter to a third of our production goes straight to them, and then they cold store it, and they have salespeople on the ground here in Australia, and then they sell it directly to the bottle shop or the pub or whoever, and then it goes out the door to them. So for us, it's easy because we actually scaled back our sales, and we don't currently have a sales manager or anything. So we rely on them to get us out of these doors here, and they distribute us around. But outside of Australia, you can't get us currently. I'd love to be in the States someday, but it is pretty competitive there, and to get beer there is quite expensive, and the storage is kind of crazy too. It's pretty hard on beers. So I don't know if it'll happen anytime but soon, but I'd love to do it someday.
Now, I'm going to speak as if I know what I'm talking about when I really don't, because I've never been to Melbourne, I've never been to Australia, but I've heard that particularly in Victoria, in Melbourne specifically, that you have a little bit of a, and I mean this as a flattering thing, like a little bit of an arrogant coffee culture. I've heard that. And like, would you say, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to be if you meet someone from Melbourne, they think coffee everywhere else sucks, and the coffee in Melbourne is paramount. So is that kind of, do you see that a little bit with craft beer? Like craft beer in Canada, or I think in the United States, is in kind of this weird gray area of being like, it's obviously a little bit more pricey than your typical macro beer. So maybe like university students would shy away from them, but like, it's not that much more expensive that it's completely for the wealthy elite. You know what I mean? So I guess this is a cultural question of who's the typical craft beer drinker in Melbourne.
I would say that Melbourne probably is the citadel for these arrogant coffee drinkers or craft beer drinkers. So when you think about it in that perspective, yeah, I think there definitely are those sort of people which do critique and in such a way can be quite arrogant when drinking beer. But then again, our role that we're trying to play here is to just to get the average Joe to pick up a craft beer and put down a pale ale, and like maybe pick up an IPA or pick up like a spontaneously fermented beer and be like, well, this could be my new like weekend session with my friends, and and whatnot. So I guess over the last couple of years, the diversity or the geography of the drinker has changed, but there still are those certain people out there who are, I guess you could say, similar to a Cicerone, everyday Cicerone. So it's like it's a good thing. It's a great thing because that means you're getting praised for making good product, or where your errors are. So I guess in a way we're quite fortunate to have such people in this area.
Well, yeah, it's great. It's great to have quality products to be proud of, for sure. I mean, like in terms of the number of craft breweries in a city, in a sizable city like Melbourne, do you see, say, maybe Casey and Ben, since you've been in the city, have you seen quite an exponential growth in the number of breweries? Is it still kind of growing? I know we've had a couple of years of kind of a speed bump to go over, but do you see still this sort of entrepreneurial drive for individuals to add more breweries to the city, or do you see sort of a stagnation of the number of breweries that exist?
Well, when we started in 2016, there was probably about maybe 10 to 15 craft breweries around in kind of greater Melbourne, and now there's a couple hundred. So it's grown a lot in the last few years. I think with the excise changes, you might see more and more people actually get into something small like we did, because it now is a little bit more doable in terms of a business model standpoint. So it is still growing, but it's not growing as fast as it was like a couple of years ago. I think COVID's definitely slowed people down and opening things up. But there's a lot of vacancies for warehouses and things like that because of COVID. So it's probably only a matter of time until they start hitting the ground pretty hard again with opening up new breweries fast. But so it's grown a lot in the last few years, and it'll probably continue to grow. It's just slowed down some with COVID.
Yeah, that makes sense for sure. I think it's kind of the same everywhere. We saw sort of from 2010. I mean, I don't want to put a stern date on it maybe, but from 2010 to 2020, just craft beer had just an absolutely explosive growth rate, particularly in the US and Canada, I'm sure in Australia as well. And yeah, now we're just sort of in this question mark period of, are things going to continue to grow? Are we going to see some closures? Like, I guess maybe that's a question for you. Did you see any breweries close in the last 2 years, or everyone was able to survive?
Yeah, there's definitely some closures. I think every year there's some closures, but it probably wasn't as many as I thought. But I think some people might still close. I don't know. It'd be interesting to see what happens over the next couple of years as people try and recover, and can they recover? We definitely saw some closures, but not like mass closures or anything like that.
What I've seen, maybe in just, I don't know, my local area, but also surrounding Southern Ontario, is sort of this emergence of dedicated bottle shops. And just, we've experienced much growth with craft breweries, and as you mentioned, so has Melbourne and surrounding area. Have you guys seen any dedicated bottle shops that maybe just host craft beer or wine, and as opposed to focusing on a brewery, then just more so not making the beer, but highlighting the local, whether it's beer or wine, whatever, all in one spot? Like, have you guys seen something like that?
I think Melbourne has plenty of those, independent craft beer shops, or local winemakers. Like I've seen that in the last year or so, there's been a growth in these as well.
Yeah, we're fairly fiercely independent, so we typically don't sell to large conglomerate bottle shops. More just like the local ones that are supporting independent breweries. So we're part of the Independent Brewers Association, and that's kind of our focus is the smaller family-run businesses like ours. And I think once you go into some of the large owned bottle shops, a lot of the smaller guys kind of despise you for it. So I'd rather support the small guy like myself rather than the big one, and they definitely squeeze you with more with more money, they try and get you to take off the beer as well. So we just don't have we don't have the capacity really to compete in that market, and that's not really our structure or our philosophy either. So but there's definitely tons of small independently owned bottle shops here, and that's who we focus on, and that's who our main consumers come from, I think, too.
That's good. Small business helping small business. And yeah, I love the idea of these bottle shops because, like, obviously in our business, we talk to a lot of people who really love craft beer. And the nature of craft beer itself is, variety, differentiation, trying a number of different things from different locations. And sometimes you can't make it to said location. So having maybe a local bottle shop that does it, or who may, obviously things are a little bit pricier at the bottle shop naturally, but it's great to have that variety in it, and sort of will even spur craft. I at least personally think it'll spur craft beer just a little bit more, because you might then continue to purchase from that bottle shop as opposed to having to go directly to the brewery. And there's obviously, home delivery and things like that now, which are very prominent. But yeah, I'm excited to see a little bit more of that. It's nice to see that it's also happening all the way across the world as well. So it's
kind of the opposite too. In the US, it's all about the big box stores there and the cheapest price. So I think it's pretty cool to see a local community embrace the small family-owned shops here. And that's one of the things I really like about Australia is there isn't fast food everywhere, and there isn't large big box shops everywhere. You can find them, but it's not nearly like the US. And I like that culture, and I like that ability to be able to go to a small shop and get a decent selection and knowledgeable staff, and not have to just go to a big box shop and try and undercut everybody.
Yeah, I would say the Australian government is pretty prevalent in supporting small businesses. So we're quite fortunate. I can only presume it's the same in Canada. Canadian government, support small business.
Yeah, definitely for a number of things. Like, small businesses are a large part of the economy here, and I imagine in many places all over the world. But seeing that shift towards the quality over quantity, right? I think there's probably still a lot, maybe many more of those here in Canada, and like you said, in the States compared to Melbourne. But I'm all for that too. And I always, every time we talk about, go and explore your local shop. You can always hit your big box stores, your fast food restaurants, but sometimes there's always a nice local place just sitting right underneath your nose, and you never know, because you're always just, your mind's sort of geared towards, the convenience and the quantity. So we propose that all the time.
Ben, I have a question for you. I don't know how long you've been in Australia. I know you mentioned you're from Estonia originally. Can you give us a little information, just because Estonia is a little European country? You don't hear about it too much. Can you tell us about maybe can you tell us maybe about craft beer in Estonia?
Yeah, certainly. So I've been here for a majority of my life, fortunately. But I guess you could say the craft beer scene in Estonia is a little bit diverse. There's a lot more differences compared to like similarities. For example, we use a whole heap of different grains, and for example, buckwheat's like a really big factor in Estonia. So they can make beer out of buckwheat, or they'll filter beer with actual moss from a bog rather than that. But over the last couple of years, the craft beer scene in Estonia has really grown substantially. It's quite saturated the market, but I think how can I put it? Sorry. I would say that Estonian people are known for their darker beers, known for like the more malt forward beers, and I guess it's a trait that they collect from the States. But yeah, Estonia is a small, tiny little country. To the fact that anyone wants to know where it is or what it is, in the north of the Baltics, and it's a pretty special little place. Makes some pretty amazing craft beers. I have a few breweries that I would suggest. Definitely get out there and try to find something.
Back to Australia, I mean, you mentioned, Ben, Estonia is more malt forward, darker beers. Like, would you say that in Melbourne specifically is, I guess, Casey relating it to like the West Coast of the US? Is the IPA, I know we touched on this a little bit, but like, is the IPA, I know you said pale ales and are big, like, are there any additional sort of nuanced styles that you see as particularly Victorian or Australian? Are there differences between areas? Like is the west coast of Australia a little bit different from the east coast? Like is Perth doing their own thing? Can you find something else in Sydney? Anything like that?
I think there is a bit of a difference. If you look at Australia as a whole, it's quite big. So like more in like the northern states, they are, like as Casey was saying, drinking a lot more lager and drinking a lot more experience. Something that's a bit more, you know, quenchable in the hotter months, and it's quite warm all year round up there. To the west, not quite sure what's going on over there. They do produce some lovely beers, but they're so far away we don't really hear much about it. But like down in the south, it's pretty diverse. You know, as Casey here was saying, in the winter months, you know, a lot of stats do come out, and a lot of Victorians and Tasmanians and South Australians do enjoy drinking heavier, darker beers here in the months. But I think it's just being with Australia, it's and craft beer being so young in this country, it's the preference for beer was quite small. So you know, you've got a lot of people who are still stuck on drinking the mass-produced beers, like, you know, like lagers and bitters. So it's still quite an educational curve for a lot of people in this country. But it's slowly changing. Like, you know, we sell a fair bit of IPA with this taproom. You know, we try to steer what the people want, not more or less what we want. So it's nice to educate people on different styles of beer and hopefully change your palate a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's interesting what you said. Like being in a colder climate area, we always, Garrett and I, we look forward to stout season every year, which is from pretty much October to now, because it's pretty much snowed today.
Most
even,
of the year,
even in May.
Canada.
Yeah. So do you think that plays a role? I mean, Estonia too, Ben, you mentioned they like kind of their darker ales, maybe it's a colder climate. You have a warm, like Australia has a much warmer, nicer, better climate. Do you think that affects the consumer at all in terms of what they like to drink?
I'm not specifically extremely experienced with Estonia, but I know that it's dark for about 3 months of the year. So I think people try to avoid dark beer. But they'll probably drink something a bit more refreshing and a bit more happy. But yeah, I think as the craft beer scene there does grow, you know, people are accepting that, you know, these lager beers are a little bit more warmer, a little bit more comfortable to drink. I think it's just two different worlds, like, you know, the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere when it comes to beer drinking compared to Australia and Estonia. It's a different realm. So that's all.
I think too, because there's a lot of like British transplants here in Australia, some of the British styles are pretty popular here, unlike the States, including like stouts. So I think, you know, stouts here are really somewhat popular year round, and then in the States it's kind of more seasonal. So I was interested to see that when I was here, and people just, you know, love a good stout, and they don't mind doing it when it's a little bit warmer out as well. So yeah, well, some of those English styles, the ambers are popular here, and but I think a lot of that is because of the British background here in Australia. So there are some different things that we see here that I probably wouldn't see like trend wise in the US, but yeah, we try and make a really wide variety of beer here, just so we can support all the different tastes and the different interests the beer drinkers have, and the, you know, the new fads and everything. So we've got 30 beers on tap, which is quite not normal in Australia.
There's a lot.
You know, typical venues will have like 6 to 10, and that was one of the things that I loved about, you know, going to the breweries in the States was you got rewarded with trying some new beers that you probably wouldn't be able to find in your, you know, local store at the brewery directly. So I wanted to kind of make that here as well. But yeah, we're always producing new styles and trying to find out what people like, and if they like it, then we scale it up and keep making it.
Yeah, you guys have a very vast list, which is awesome. And I just giving a look on your website now, and a lot of them sound wonderful. Also saw that you have a steam ale, which is not very common. Well, it's not common at all in Southern Ontario, that's for sure. But yeah, the variety you have is fantastic. What, if you're going to, keep up that variety, like you said, you guys like to do, what goes into that? Like maybe what goes into the next beer up that you're always looking to make?
I think we always talk about it as a team, like, what should we brew next and what type of ingredients can we find that we haven't used before. But we do a lot of 50-liter batches, and we like to experiment with those batches and do something, a little bit out of the box, or some different ingredients. And then if people buy it, then we'll go ahead and scale it up into something larger. But yeah, we typically dedicate probably anywhere from 3 to 10 taps with test batches at all times. So we're trying things out, and it's not just Ben and I coming up with recipe after recipe too. We have other people on our team that are pretty talented, and some other brewers as well that are working in the tap room. So we get a lot of new ideas and people wanting us to brew different things, and we do it, and it's interesting to see what people are into and what they're not.
Maybe in recent months or brews or anything to that effect, has there been a brew that's maybe stood out to you, something that maybe to you or maybe to your customers that has sort of been a real hit?
The double IPA that we did for the New Zealand Hop Challenge was called House of Learned Doctors, after Step Brothers quote. But yeah, a lot of times some of the bigger beers that I really enjoy because I'm a hophead, the consumer doesn't necessarily enjoy. So they were really going crazy for that beer. So that was good to see. So I think we'll probably definitely do some more New Zealand hopped, heavily hopped beers. But I don't know. I mean, I guess the imperial stouts tend to be pretty big sellers. Some of the sour beers are pretty big sellers. Also, we're starting to see more of a trend for the low to no alcohol stuff. So we're experimenting more and more. We're actually kind of going more towards the zero alcohol sour, like we're kind of a wild style beer, because I think it holds up pretty well to having the alcohol and that body kind of removed, and the overall flavor of the beer is still coming through. And then we kind of add fruit or something else into it to make it pop after the alcohol has been removed. So we'll probably be doing those more and more, and I think they're definitely growing in popularity across the country.
No, for sure. We're seeing that as a huge movement, especially in here. And we talked more about Southern Ontario, but I think in North America in general. But like a non-alcoholic sour beer, now that's something I don't think I've seen very often. Maybe one time, but like that sounds really interesting. Obviously, sour beers are a very popular trend, and I think it's for the most part it's still chugging away pretty good. But if you can pair that with the non-alcohol component, I think that's
I think the
fantastic.
non-alcoholic hop forward beers can be pretty hit or miss. But we did a sour beer as like a barrel-aged wild sour, and we added some kumquat and mountain pepper, I think it was. And we had a hard time telling the difference between one with alcohol and without. So I think the sours do hold up pretty well to that process. So I haven't seen a lot of people doing it here either, but I think we're gonna hopefully see if people are into it on a larger scale here pretty soon. We're gonna release something kind of for wholesale and nationwide, and we'll see if people like it as much as we do, I guess.
Westside Ale Works, you have some interesting sort of unique features to your story and the brewery. I mean, Casey, I think bringing your knowledge and experience with American craft beer to Melbourne, I think that's a pretty unique feature. You also mentioned having 30 beers on tap, which is a lot. That seems to be quite unique, as you mentioned, to other craft breweries in the city, probably in the country too. I think your location seems really beneficial to you in terms of where it is in the city. So those are all really cool features. On top of those three, are there any additional features or components or attributes that exist in Westside Ale Works that makes you unique within the eclectic Melbourne craft beer scene?
One thing that we've been doing kind of over the last couple of years, as we've been getting more and more into like barrel-aged beers, specifically wild beers and high gravity beers. So Ben and I launched together a sub brand called Ila Pool, which means East Brew in Estonian. And we have another warehouse in North Melbourne where it's just barrels. And we've spent $0 on yeast for all those barrels. So Ben's really good at capturing wild yeast from different parts of the state, and we kind of step those small cultures up, and then if we like them, we add them to the barrels. So we have a lot of unique kind of flavors coming out of the barrels that you wouldn't get anywhere else. And we're also doing like some kind of high gravity stuff like imperial stouts and barley wines and imperial porters and things like that. So everything barrel aged. So I think for us, for a brewery our size, we actually have a really big barrel program. So that's pretty unique, and it's only growing. So yeah, that's something that probably a lot of people don't know because they come into our brewery and it's not very big, and we do have some barrels, in physical view here, but we have quite a few more offsite.
Yeah, very cool. Maybe Ben, do you have an additional idea of what makes you guys special in the city, maybe in the state, in the country?
I think compared to most other breweries in Australia, especially around this country, I think the difference to Westside Ale Works compared to, say, most other breweries within Melbourne that I've seen, which are equally as great and do make some fantastic beers, is that when you walk into these other breweries, it's more or less you're walking into a tap room or like a bar, and you see the brewery behind the scenes. But I think what Westside really has, and what is slightly different, is like when you walk into Westside Ale, you're walking into a brewery. So you're as a consumer of beer and going to a brewery, it's nice to be like a part of the atmosphere, to be like, well, this is where the beer is made. I'm sitting right next to the grain. I can physically touch it and enter as I can get around. But I think it is another checkup is that we do have lots of diversity in our beer collection, which ranges from IPAs to pale ales to meads to wild beers and to stouts, and to be sure that we can not only cater for like specific public of Australia, but whoever is more interested in coming in from abroad or just having a day trip around the city to appetize them to come in and try something new or something that they do enjoy.
I love it. Well, guys, we're coming up on our hour mark. We want to be respectful of your time and for you guys to get on with your day, for Garrett and I to go to bed. Do you guys have any final points to take away for anyone listening in Canada or the United States? Maybe any additional information on the brewery itself, on beer in Australia, anything, any final points? The floor is yours.
Come to Australia, come visit us. I think the country's starting to rebound with COVID and opening the borders and everything. So it's a good time to come because it's not overly crowded right now. You can kind of get your pick of the hotels and where you want to go, but there's lots to see here. It's a beautiful country, lots of great beer, and other than that, no, I think that's pretty much it. I think it's a good country to experience if you haven't been here before. It's definitely different than like Europe or the States or anything like that. So you can see quite a bit of different things here, from like the Great Barrier Reef to the Solar Apostles down the road from us here, and Tasmania's natural beauty, and New Zealand's not too far away. So if you want to get out and experience something different, I highly recommend it.
It's worth an adventure. I like that. All right. Well, Casey, Ben from Westside Ale Works in Melbourne, Australia. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. And we look forward to chatting again soon.
Yeah, thanks for having us. It was great.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys. Cheers. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on all our interviews and beer-related content. Remember, craft beer is here.